California has absolutely no idea what is about to walk through its doors. Not a storm, not a trend, not a feel-good underdog story that fades after the first round. What is heading toward the Indian Wells Tennis Garden right now is something the tournament has never encountered in its entire history, and the people who run it are only just beginning to understand the scale of what is coming. Ticket sales are climbing in ways their data has never predicted. Sections of the stadium are being reserved wholesale by organized community groups. The secondary market for sessions when a single player is expected to compete has already seen prices double, and the draw hasn't even been fully released yet. The fifth Grand Slam is about to be transformed, and the player responsible for all of it is ranked 31st in the world, 22 years old, and playing the best tennis of her life. Eala is heading to Indian Wells, and California, for all its size and all its experience hosting world-class events, is simply not prepared for what the Filipino community is about to bring to that desert stadium. But before we get into the crowds, the ticket prices, and the atmosphere that is coming, we need to talk about how she even got here, because that part of the story matters just as much as everything else. A year ago, Eala was ranked 137th in the world. Let that number sit for a moment. 137th. Not a player on the fringes of the top 100 trying to crack the upper tier, not someone hovering just outside the top 50 waiting for a breakthrough. She was deep in the mid-rankings, grinding through the kind of results that don't make headlines, building something that most of the tennis world wasn't paying close attention to yet. 12 months later, she is ranked 31st. That is not a gradual climb. That is not steady incremental progress. That is one of the most dramatic single-season rises in women's tennis in recent memory, and it was built entirely on results that nobody could argue with. The Miami Open semifinals. Think about what that means at a tournament of that stature. Miami is one of the most competitive events on the WTA calendar, a tournament where the world's best players show up in full form and treat it as a genuine title contender. Reaching the semifinals there, coming through qualifying, playing match after match after match against players who had direct entry and rested legs is the kind of achievement that makes the tennis world stop scrolling and pay attention. Then came Dubai, where she walked onto the court against Jasmine Paolini, ranked world number 8, one of the most experienced and tactically intelligent players on tour, and she beat her. Not narrowly, not in a tight three-setter that could have gone either way. She beat her 6-1, 7-6, a scoreline that looks almost brutal against a player of that caliber. Then Auckland semifinals, Abu Dhabi quarterfinals, a gold medal at the Southeast Asian Games, an Australian Open main draw debut that confirmed what everyone paying attention already suspected, that this wasn't a hot streak, this was a player who had genuinely arrived. Every result built on the last one. Every performance added another layer of evidence that what was happening was real and sustainable and not going away. She climbed from 137 to 31, not because of wild cards or lucky draws or opponents pulling out injured. She earned every single point, and when her entry for Indian Wells was confirmed, she wasn't entered through a sponsor's invitation or a tournament exemption. She was entered through her ranking, world number 31. A ranking that places her in the main draw automatically, that seeds her ahead of dozens of players who have been competing at this level for years longer than she has. She earned her spot, the only way that actually means something in professional tennis, by winning enough matches against good enough players that the computer had no choice but to put her in the field. The tournament organizers confirmed her entry, and then the ticket sales started moving. What happened next caught the Indian Wells Tennis Garden completely off guard. Tournament directors are used to ticket spikes when certain players enter the draw. Serena Williams created them for years. The Williams sisters together could turn any event into a sold-out spectacle. In recent years, players like Coco Gauff have started generating that kind of commercial pull with a younger demographic, but none of that history prepared the people who manage the BNP Paribas Open's commercial operations for what they started seeing in the days and weeks after Eala's entry was confirmed. It wasn't just a spike, it was a surge from a direction their data had never pointed toward. Filipino community groups across California began organizing almost immediately, not individual fans buying individual tickets. Organized groups, coordinated bookings, fan clubs from Los Angeles reaching out to secure sections, groups from San Diego planning convoy trips to the desert, communities from Daly City in the Bay Area putting together travel packages that included tickets, accommodation, and coordinated arrival times so they could fill their sections together and create the kind of unified wall of sound that had already become the signature of an Eala match at any tournament she entered.
The secondary market responded the way secondary markets always respond to genuine demand that outpaces supply. Prices climbed. Seats for sessions when Eala is expected to play are reportedly going for double their original face value in some cases. Not because of artificial inflation or coordinated speculation, but because real people with real money want to be in that stadium when she walks onto that court, and there are more of them than the tournament's standard pricing model accounted for. That gap between supply and demand is what economists call a market signal. What it is signaling here is that Eala, ranked 31st in the world, is generating more ticket demand from a specific demographic community than players ranked significantly higher than her are generating from the general tennis audience. That is not a minor observation. That is a complete reversal of the normal commercial logic that governs professional tennis, where ranking and prize money history and Grand Slam titles are the primary drivers of fan interest in ticket sales. None of that framework explains what is happening at Indian Wells right now. The Eala effect operates by different rules, and the tournament's commercial side is only now beginning to understand what those rules are. The real dollars are already flowing, and the tournament hasn't even started yet. To understand why this is such a remarkable commercial disruption, you need to understand what Indian Wells actually is. This is not a mid-tier event on the WTA calendar. This is not a tournament where upsets and surprises carry extra weight because the field is thin and the prize money is modest. The BNP Paribas Open at Indian Wells is called the 5th Grand Slam, and the name is not given out of politeness or promotional enthusiasm. It is earned. The prize pool for 2026 exceeds $9 million. The facility, the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, is one of the most celebrated tennis venues in the world, with a stadium court that holds over 16,000 spectators and a grounds layout that players and coaches consistently describe as one of the best environments in which to compete. The tournament runs for nearly 2 weeks and draws the complete field of the world's best players, with almost no exceptions. When you enter Indian Wells, you are entering the most competitive non-Grand Slam environment in the sport. And the field this year reflects that. Aryna Sabalenka, the world #1, multiple Grand Slam champion, arguably the most dominant player in women's tennis over the past 2 years, is in the draw. Iga Swiatek, who has been world #1 for extended stretches and remains one of the most complete players the sport has ever produced, is in the draw. Mira Andreeva, the defending champion at this very event, is in the draw. Jessica Pegula, Coco Gauff, every name that matters in the current women's game is on that entry list. These are players who have spent years, in some cases decades, building the reputations, the results, and the commercial profiles that command premium ticket prices at events of this stature. They are the established names. They are the players that tournament sponsors build their marketing campaigns around. They are the reason Indian Wells carries its prestige. And right there in the middle of that list is Eala, world #31, who is generating more ticket demand from a specific demographic than any of those established names are generating from the general audience. Read that again slowly. A player ranked 31st in a field that includes the world #1 and multiple Grand Slam champions is the single biggest driver of ticket sales at this tournament. That is the Eala effect in its purest commercial form, and it is happening at the 5th Grand Slam on American soil in front of a global tennis audience that is about to witness something it has never seen before at this event. Before California, there was Oregon, and what happened in Oregon set the tone for everything that is coming. Eala arrived in the United States earlier than most players in the draw. The strategy was deliberate. Indian Wells is played in the California desert, and the conditions there are genuinely unique. The air is dry in a way that affects how players breathe and how quickly they fatigue.
The altitude influences ball flight in ways that take time to adjust to. The courts at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden played differently than what Eala encountered during the Middle East swing in the Oceania swing earlier in the year. Getting to the United States first, acclimatizing to the time zone, getting hours on the specific type of surface and in the specific environmental conditions she will face during the tournament, these are the marginal advantages that separate players at the elite level, where everyone is talented, everyone is fit, and everyone is prepared, and the differences come down to the details that some players attend to and others don't. 7 years at the Rafa Nadal Academy instilled exactly this kind of thinking. That institution is built on meticulous preparation and the understanding that championships are won in the weeks before the tournament, not just in the matches during it. The philosophy shows in how Eala operates. She does not arrive the day before and hope for the best. She arrives early. She accounts for variables that others might overlook. She treats preparation as the competitive weapon that it actually is.
But before heading south to the desert, she stopped in Beaverton, Oregon, at Nike World Headquarters. What she found there was something that no amount of practice court preparation could have given her. Her portraits were already on display in the famous Nike Tunnel, the corridor inside the headquarters where the brand displays its most iconic athletes alongside images that capture the moments that defined their stories. This is not a wall where Nike places up-and-coming talents hoping to drum up enthusiasm. This is where the greatest athletes the brand has ever represented are commemorated. The fact that Alex Eala's image is there, at 22 years old, ranked 31st in the world, is a statement about how Nike assesses the trajectory of what she represents. One portrait captured her iconic reaction after reaching the Miami semifinals, both hands on her face, eyes overwhelmed. The raw, unfiltered emotion of someone who has just achieved something that exceeded even their own belief in what was possible. The caption beneath that portrait reads, "History in full bloom." Nike does not write captions carelessly. Every word in that facility is chosen with intention. History in full bloom is not a description of a tennis result. It is a characterization of a cultural moment in progress, something larger than a scoreline, something with roots that go deeper than one tournament's semi-final run. The second image on display was a photograph of Eala taking a selfie with Filipino fans. Think about what it means that Nike chose to put that photograph in its global headquarters alongside the athletic portrait. They could have displayed another match photo, another victory moment, another image of athletic excellence that focuses on the player and the competition. Instead, they put a fan photo on the wall at Beaverton, because Nike understands something that the tournament directors at Indian Wells are only now beginning to grasp. The Eala story is not primarily a story about a talented tennis player climbing the rankings. It is a story about a community claiming a space in a sport that has historically not made room for them, and doing it through the achievements of someone who carries that community's identity with pride every time she walks onto a court. The fan photo belongs on that wall because the fans are part of why this partnership exists. They are not a footnote to the athletic achievement, they are central to it. Eala walked out of Nike's global headquarters with her portraits on display beside the greatest athletes in sports history, with a caption describing her story as historic, and with 2 weeks of preparation time still ahead of her before Indian Wells begins. Whatever psychological fuel practice courts provide, whatever confidence match wins accumulate, nothing replicates what it does to your self-belief to see your own face on that wall. She walked into the California desert knowing something about herself that training alone cannot tell you. Now let's talk about California, because this is where everything becomes different in scale. Dubai was remarkable. The Filipino fans who traveled to the UAE created an atmosphere that Coco Gauff personally acknowledged after her quarterfinal victory over Eala, stepping to the crowd and thanking them specifically for the energy they brought to the tournament. That is an extraordinary thing, a player who just won a match addressing the opponent's supporters because the atmosphere they created was so exceptional that it deserved direct recognition. Auckland was remarkable. Melbourne set records.
Abu Dhabi was electric. Every tournament Eala has entered in 2026 has been transformed by the crowd she brings with her. But all of those were traveling fans. People who made deliberate decisions to get on planes, book hotels, arrange schedules around being in a specific city for a tennis tournament to support a specific player. The logistical commitment required to show up for Eala in Dubai or Auckland is significant. It filters the crowd down to the most dedicated supporters. The people who were there did everything they needed to do to be there, and they still filled sections, created noise, and generated atmospheres that the tournaments had never experienced before for a player at Eala's ranking level. California is not that. California is home to the largest Filipino diaspora in the United States. The Filipino-American community in this state is not a small, concentrated pocket of immigrants and first-generation families. It is a massive, established, deeply rooted community spread across Los Angeles, San Diego, the Bay Area, the Central Valley, and dozens of smaller cities and towns in between. It is a community that has been in California for generations in many cases, that has built institutions and organizations and social networks that allow for the kind of coordinated collective action that is now being directed at Indian Wells. Fan clubs from Los Angeles to San Diego to Daly City are not asking their members to buy plane tickets and book international hotels. They are asking them to drive to the desert, or take a bus, or join a carpool. The logistical barrier between the Filipino community in California and the Indian Wells Garden is a freeway, not an ocean.
This is why the tournament directors are reportedly stunned. Not because they didn't know Filipino fans traveled to support Eala, that has been documented at every event she has entered this season, but because they assumed that phenomenon was driven by dedicated traveling supporters willing to make extraordinary efforts. What they are now dealing with is an entirely different category of fan mobilization. This is a local community, one of the largest ethnic diaspora communities in the state, showing up for one of their own in their own backyard. There is no logistical friction to overcome. There is no financial barrier of international travel to limit numbers. The only question is whether they can get tickets, and the secondary market data suggests they are buying them at double face value to make sure the answer is yes. The sections being reserved by community groups aren't small clusters of enthusiastic fans hoping to make some noise. They are coordinated, organized blocks of supporters who have watched what the traveling Filipino fans did in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Auckland and have one collective thought: we can do that and then some, because they have the numbers, because they have the proximity, because they have been waiting for this exact moment since Eala's Miami run last year made it undeniably clear that she could compete with and beat the best players in the world. And they are ready. Here is something that the noise and the crowds and the commercial disruption can sometimes obscure. Eala arrives at Indian Wells in the best competitive position of her career. She is not coming through qualifying this year. Last year in Miami, she came through qualifying and still reached the semifinals. That achievement was extraordinary, and it also illustrated something important about what qualifying costs a player at a tournament of that length. Coming through qualifying means playing matches before the main draw begins. It means burning physical energy and emotional intensity in rounds that don't count toward the main draw seedings, but absolutely count in terms of fatigue accumulation and injury risk. The players she defeated in Miami had direct entry. They were fresh. She was not, and she still beat them. The fact that she can do all of that while also carrying the full weight of being the most talked about player in the draw, managing the media attention, the fan expectations, the cultural significance of every result, and the psychological pressure of being watched by millions and still make the semifinals, says something fundamental about who she is as a competitor. This year at Indian Wells, she has direct entry. She arrives without having played qualifying rounds. She arrives after 2 weeks of recovery following Dubai. She arrives with the physical freshness that direct entry provides and with the psychological momentum of having visited Nike headquarters and seen her story described as historic on a wall that most athletes will never see their own image on. The conditions she has been preparing for, specifically the dry desert air, the altitude-affected ball flight, the particular bounce characteristics of the courts at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, have been her focus since arriving in the United States.
She has more preparation time than she has had at comparable events, she has fewer physical miles on her legs entering the tournament, and she has a crowd waiting for her that will make the facility feel like a home venue from the moment she walks onto the court. The opposition is formidable. There is no world in which anyone serious about tennis pretends otherwise. Sabalenka on her best day is capable of beating anyone in the field in straight sets with a level of aggressive power that makes every opponent feel like they are defending against a wall of incoming fire. Swiatek's consistency and tactical intelligence make her one of the most difficult players to outmaneuver over a best-of-3-set match. Andreeva is defending a title at this specific event and has the game and the experience to defend it. Any of the top seeds is capable of winning this tournament, and any of them is capable of beating Eala in a given match on a given day. But that has always been true at every tournament she has entered this season, and she has been beating them anyway. Here is what every opponent who faces Alex Eala at Indian Wells is actually going to experience. They are going to walk out onto a court in the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, a facility that seats over 16,000 people, and they are going to hear what Coco Gauff heard in Dubai and felt compelled to acknowledge publicly. They are going to play against a player who has thousands of passionate, organized, vocal supporters making noise that turns the neutral tournament atmosphere into something that feels like a home crowd advantage at every change of ends. When Eala wins a point, the response from the stands will not be polite applause. It will be the kind of eruption that rattles concentration and shifts the psychological balance of a match in ways that are real and measurable. When she loses a point, her supporters will immediately respond with encouragement that reminds her and everyone watching that the crowd has not moved and will not move, regardless of the score. Players are trained to handle crowd noise. Elite professionals develop the mental discipline to block out atmosphere and focus only on the ball in their game plan. But there is a difference between blocking out general crowd noise and competing in an environment where the noise is specifically and pointedly directed against your momentum at every critical moment of every critical game. The away team effect in tennis is not as codified as it is in team sports, but it is real. Players who have had to face Eala in front of Filipino crowds this season have spoken about the experience in terms that make it clear they felt its impact. Cal Query and Steve Johnson, two former ATP professionals with decades of combined experience playing in front of major crowds at major tournaments, stated publicly that Eala's drawing power was bigger than Joel Embiid's on the men's side at a comparable event last year. That is not a small comparison. Embiid is an NBA superstar who generates extraordinary public attention wherever he appears. The fact that two experienced professionals made that comparison in the context of a women's tennis player ranked outside the top 25 tells you something about the scale of what Eala's presence does to the commercial and atmospheric reality of any tournament she enters. Kim Clijsters, one of the most decorated players in women's tennis history and a multiple Grand Slam champion, said that Eala has to deal with the life of being like Michael Jordan in the Philippines. The Michael Jordan comparison is not casual. It is a specific characterization of a player who has transcended the sport she plays and become a cultural symbol of something larger than athletic achievement for an entire community. Jordan didn't just win basketball games, he represented something about possibility and excellence and identity that made every game he played feel like more than a game. Clijsters is saying Eala carries that same weight in the Philippines. And what is happening at Indian Wells is that weight, that cultural significance, that identity representation is being transported to American soil for the first time at this scale. The Filipino community in California has been watching what happened in Dubai, in Auckland, in Melbourne. They have seen the videos of packed sections draped in blue, red, and white. They have seen Gauff addressing the crowd. They have seen the atmospheres had a traveling fan base created across multiple continents. And they have had one thought. That was them making the effort. This time, we are here. This time, we don't need to travel. This is our state, our community, our backyard, and our player is on our court. What we are about to do for her is what those traveling fans did times 10. When Eala walks out for her first match at Indian Wells, she will not experience the standard entrance of a player ranked 31st in the world at a major tournament. She will experience something closer to what the top seeds experience at their home country's biggest events, the kind of reception that players spend their entire careers trying to earn. She will hear her name in a way that makes the stadium feel like it was built for this exact moment. She will look into the stands and see the blue, red, and white that has followed her from Auckland to Dubai to Melbourne to Oregon to the California desert, and she will know, in the way that great competitors know things that transcend data and analysis, that she is not alone out there. Every opponent who has to face her in that environment will understand what Gauff understood in Dubai. Playing against Eala is one thing. That alone requires your best tennis, your best preparation, your best competitive mindset. But playing against Eala while simultaneously playing against an entire organized community that is making its presence felt in every point, every game, every set, that is a genuinely different competitive challenge, one that the players in this field have not yet encountered at this scale. One that no amount of experience at Indian Wells in previous years could have prepared them for, because this has never happened here before. March 4th, the tournament opens. The countdown is gone. The fans are already booked, the sections are already reserved, the community groups from Los Angeles, San Diego, in the Bay Area have their travel plans finalized and their tickets secured, some at double face value, because getting into that stadium when Eala plays is worth whatever the secondary market is asking. The tournament directors, who were reportedly stunned by the surge in ticket sales, are now simply managing the reality that their event has been permanently changed by the arrival of a player who represents something the tournament has never had to account for before.
Eala walks into Indian Wells having done everything right. She arrived in the United States early. She prepared specifically for desert conditions. She visited Nike's global headquarters and saw her own portrait on a wall that commemorates the greatest athletes in sports history. She arrives with a top 30 ranking she earned through results that shocked the tennis world, one match at a time. She arrives fresh, rested, and psychologically fueled in a way that players who grind through qualifying simply cannot match. She arrives with every meaningful advantage that preparation and momentum and cultural significance can provide. The 5th Grand Slam is about to become something it has never been before. Not because of a tournament decision or a marketing campaign or a coordinated outreach effort to broaden tennis's demographic appeal, but because one player, through the singular combination of her talent and her identity in the community that sees itself in everything she does, changed what it means to be a fan of this sport in California. Tennis in the United States has been trying for years to reach communities that have historically not engaged heavily with the professional game. Eala accomplished that in a single season, without a promotional budget, without a coordinated strategy, without anything other than winning tennis matches and carrying herself in a way that made people proud to be associated with her story. What is about to happen at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden is the result of that. It is the Filipino diaspora in California doing what the Filipino diaspora has done everywhere she has played this year, showing up, organizing, making noise, and transforming the atmosphere of a tournament through sheer collective force of will and pride. It is the Eala effect arriving on American soil at full strength for the first time at the 5th Grand Slam in front of a global tennis audience that has never seen anything quite like it. Every player who has to walk onto that court and face her in front of that crowd will understand something about what is happening in this sport right now that no ranking or seeding or prize money history can fully explain. Playing against Eala is one thing. Playing against Eala in the entire Filipino community of California at the same time in a desert stadium that has been turned into something that looks and sounds like the most electric home crowd this tournament has ever hosted is something else completely. The 5th Grand Slam has never seen anything like what is coming, and it starts now.